Hi, Thriller Movies Recap here. Today I'm going to show you a movie from 2020, so relax and enjoy. Spoilers ahead, watch out. Sarah is having the time of her life on the stunning island of Mauritius. She starts dating Jackson, her diving instructor, who demonstrates to her what life is like away from the corporate world. Jackson encourages her to stay as they look at their photos on her last day, but Sarah is unable to do so because she has an important work in London. Sarah waits for Jackson to finish using the restroom before saying goodbye since she dislikes saying goodbye. She then abruptly departs, obviously regretting her actions. Jackson is utterly devastated when he emerges from the building again. A year later, Sarah is going about her usual business in London when she receives a message from a friend in Mauritius informing her that she is getting married and asking Sarah to be her maid of honor. Sarah agrees, and a little while later she arrives on the island prepared to have a good time. She first makes a stop at an old friend's house to get alcohol and unexpectedly gets attacked by a dog. The owner calls the dog back right away while Sarah scales the fence and extends a warm greeting to her. He asks her if she has already visited a certain person after putting alcohol in her car, but Sarah acts as though she is unaware of what he is talking about. After that, Sarah meets up with her friends and they swim in a waterfall before taking a break in a pub. Sarah's friend doubts if she'll remain this time, but Sarah insists on working in London. As her friend explains that Jackson now owns his own diving school, Sarah recognizes Jackson nearby and quickly covers her face. Sarah attends a beach party in the evening and finds Jackson there as well. She approaches him for a discussion after gathering her courage, but the conversation is uncomfortable and awkward. Jackson excuses himself by saying that he has to go to work, but Sarah follows and offers to accompany him home. Jackson is initially hesitant before agreeing. When Sarah congratulates him on his school later at his residence, Jackson is forced to reveal that Sarah's drive had encouraged him. As the evening goes on, Sarah and Jackson experience several tender moments together, leading Sarah to confess she has missed him. Jackson, though, is upset and says he doesn't understand the point of staying with her if she will just go again. When Sarah suggests that Jackson travel to London with her, he remarks that he would never be fulfilled there. Following a disagreement, they end up kissing and spending the night together. The following morning, Sarah receives a call from a friend informing her that she is 30 minutes late and that they must leave immediately because there is only one ferry on the island that travels to the wedding venue. Sarah rushes outside and asks her old pal Freddie for a favor. Since he is a pilot, he can fly her to the wedding on his own plane. Sarah does not want to miss the wedding. Jackson boards the airplane because he is also attending the wedding, but he is upset that Sarah left once more without saying anything. Freddie urges Sarah to take the co-pilot position once they are in the air so they can catch up. Freddie takes the opportunity to go over a few things with her about the plane, including how to operate the autopilot and keep the plane steady, as she used to take flying lessons. This will enable her to assist him when it's time for him to get up to take his medication. They converse a little about their personal lives as well, and Freddie admits he is still mourning the loss of his deceased wife, whose picture he keeps on the plane. When Freddie starts coughing, Sarah calls for Jackson to get some water, but he is unable to do so. Sarah tries to comfort Freddie after realizing he is suffering a heart attack, but Freddie collapses and falls on the yoke, causing the plane to pitch down and Jackson to have brain injuries. An oxygen tank suddenly flies out from behind and strikes the control panel and windshield. In the meantime, Sarah takes the yoke and urgently attempts to recall what Freddie said to her to force the plane to go higher and maintain it steady ahead as Jackson approaches and throws Freddie off the pilot's seat. Fortunately, the airplane is stabilized just in time to avoid hitting the ocean. Jackson then tries to perform CPR on Freddie, but it is too late, he has already passed away. When he inquires about Sarah's ability to pilot the airplane, she admits that she has limited experience because she only had a few lessons 2 years ago. She evaluates the damage and notices that the GPS is destroyed, so they try using their phones, but they don't have signal up there. They then repeatedly attempt the radio but receive no response, and when they try the autopilot, it turns out that it is also broken. They only have half a tank of fuel left, which might not be enough to transport them to a secure location, which only makes problems worse. At least the compass is functional, so they try to determine their previous course by using their watches and set a timer for when they will turn the plane again. Unfortunately, a massive, black storm emerges out of nowhere in front of them, and Sarah is helpless. A radio call from Samuel arrives at that same moment. The signal is lost as the jet approaches the storms, but Sarah informs him that they are flying the aircraft and that Freddie passed away. After a brief period of static, Samuel returns and informs the group that the storm is too large for them to fly through. However, before he can provide any advice, the connection is lost once more. Jackson switches places with Sarah so she may sit in the pilot's seat, but she is still unsure of what to do when a lightning strike strikes the airplane, shaking it as it flies through the pitch-black sky. As she struggles to maintain control, Sarah decides she will attempt to fly above the storm, disregarding Jackson when he expresses concern that they are traveling too high. Eventually, Sarah is able to steer the plane in the right direction after much effort, and they soon arrive at a clear sky. Regrettably, the altitude also makes them queasy. As Sarah strains to see clearly and collapses, the plane nosedives once more into the storm. When the plane loses control, they are unable to see anything due to the thick clouds, but Sarah awakens up and keeps struggling with the yoke. She finally levels the plane after much effort, but there is not much gasoline left. As soon as Sarah remembers the backup tank, she switches to it, but the second fuel tank rises quickly for a brief moment before it abruptly begins to descend. Jackson chooses to take the risk and walk out to mend the tank, which is positioned on the wings of the jet, after tying his body to the plane with some rope because he believes there may be a leak. Although Sarah doesn't like the idea at all, she is compelled to stay inside and fly the airplane as she trembles in fear as Jackson ascends to the front of the airplane. He starts the engine there, and as soon as he does, petrol sprays into his face, confirming the leak. Due to the wind and speed, he attempts to apply duct tape, but it takes him a few tries until he succeeds. When the hole is patched, the fuel gauge becomes stable. Jackson tries to re-enter the plane, but he slips and tumbles, leaving him dangling beneath the wing. While Sarah is horrified and tries to assist him, leaving the yoke alone causes the plane to begin swerving. Sarah uses the seat belt to fix the situation by wrapping it around the yoke, which successfully stabilizes the airplane. She then runs over to Jackson and motions for him to take hold of her hand. However, as he stretches out his fingers, he is slammed into the side of the plane. Sarah makes an extra attempt to grab him, and after bringing him inside, she notices that his arm was severely injured during the struggle. Jackson takes a sip from a bottle of wine intended for the wedding before Sarah and Jackson pour it on the wound to clean it, which is severely burned. Sarah uses the opportunity to crack his arm back into place while telling him how she always thinks of their time together to distract him from the pain. She then uses a hanger as a temporary splint, covers his arm in bandages, and compliments him on the incredible feat he just did. They then notice that the fuel gauge is at 5% and decide to continue flying till they land. They start tossing out various items because Sarah thinks it will be a good idea to lighten the plane so that it uses less fuel, frightening a few people with a sudden object shower. The plan works and keeps the fuel gauge stable. Jackson then asks a challenging question, which Sarah understands to suggest that they should also dispose of Freddie's body. She feels awful, but Jackson tells her that their survival comes first. Sarah pushes Freddie off the plane after placing the wife's photo in his body and sobbing briefly over his passing. Next, Sarah wants to get rid of the liquor, but Jackson reminds her that it contains ethanol and may be used as fuel. Given that Jackson is injured, Sarah decides that she will take the risk this time since she believes it to be a good idea. She carefully and gently ascends to the top of the airplane, holding onto a wing, and opens the fuel tank's valve from there. Jackson hands her the bottle, but because to the high wind, it flies out of her hands. Jackson swiftly tries again, and this time the valve opens, allowing Sarah to slowly pour 3 bottles into it. Sarah tries to advance slowly, but she almost loses her hold. She leaps inside the airplane, feeling relieved but also experiencing a mild panic attack. Jackson then admits that he might have spotted an island while they were drinking. Going back is dangerous since they run the chance of using up the remaining fuel on an error. The fuel indicator keeps dropping, so she turns the plane around and they start looking for the island Jackson spotted. Unfortunately, they don't uncover anything, and eventually the tank runs dry, forcing the plane to land. Sarah and Jackson apologize to one another for being egotistical and not paying closer attention to each other's needs, believing that this is the end. Sarah also admits that she despises saying goodbye since it makes her want to stay. Jackson then recognizes the island he had earlier seen, but they now need to determine how to land the plane. Jackson tries to help Sarah, who hardly understands the fundamentals, but the plane still starts falling rapidly and collides with the ocean pretty violently. Both of them is rendered unconscious when the plane abruptly turns over. The plane begins to gently sink before coming to rest on the cliff's edge below the ocean's surface. Sarah awakens as the water inside the plane starts to fill up, and she frantically tries to wake Jackson up but is unable. As the cockpit fills with water, Sarah fights to open the door for a few seconds before succeeding and instantly swimming to the top. As soon as she can breathe again, she starts shouting out for Jackson, but he never shows up. Sarah swims back down and finds the plane is about to drop off the edge after refusing to give up on him. Fortunately, Jackson's body has risen and is now ensnared in the wing, so Sarah hastily takes a life jacket, drapes it over Jackson, and inflates it seconds before the plane plummets to the ground. Sarah swims up and carries Jackson to the island as the airplane plunges into the depths. There, she does CPR to Jackson until he awakens. Sarah giggles joyfully before they both collapse on the sand from tiredness. They awaken a few hours later when they sense the water becoming too close. They are actually on a sandbar, which will go with the tide, as Jackson recognizes. Sarah can't believe this and sobs at the idea that they are never safe. The pair is left floating in the ocean after the tide goes out, and their limbs are wearing out from struggling to maintain their bodies upright and swim against the river. Jackson uses the opportunity to tell Sarah he loves her as Sarah breaks down in tears as she understands all their efforts were in vain because they would die here anyhow. As they kiss while bracing themselves for the worst, she responds to his comments. Finally, a rescue boat arrives to pick them up at that point. Fortunately, they are able to swim to the boat and board it, allowing them to eventually reach safety despite Sarah being uneasy about some underwater shadows. They both decides there won't be any more farewells because they don't think they are still living.
Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.